insofar as like trying to encourage civil society to do more in the space of building and maintaining the and propelling forward at least our democracy as it is. So Oliver, I'm going to hand over to you on account of the state of disaster situation not happening, not working the way we thought it would, and people. What is the new Minister of Electricity also seems to be shocked that we don't have power. I think he's in good company there at the cabinet. So we're going to ask you to start us off. And I know we had initially wanted to start with Afrobarometer, but I guess part of what your job is engaging every day with citizens, whether it be people who are calling into your station or even the experts that you are able to bring onto your platform, and perhaps give us a bit of a synthesis around what it is that you think people are grappling with as it relates to our democracy, as it relates to understanding and actually enjoying the fruits of that democracy. Are there fruits? Are we able to reap them? Are they for a certain few? What's the situation? Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really very appreciative of this opportunity. And this is a really, really important conversation. Perhaps I want to start here because this would pave the way for at least what I want to inject into the conversation substantively. I want to start by giving a qualitative democracy rating from my vantage point. And I could be entirely wrong about this, and this is why it is a qualitative rating. It's just my own value judgment. I think if I had to rate our democracy from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst possible failed democracy, to 10 being the greatest possible achieving democracy, I would rate us a 6.5 on a bad day, maybe a 7 on a really good day. How do we get then from a 7 to a 10? And that's where the gap is, and that's where I want to focus on. But why do I think that we're an above average democracy effectively? And that's because the many of the key features of a democracy we have, and they function really well. We often, sometimes incorrectly so, want to evaluate our democratic health based on material prosperity. And if we do that, then even the best democracies in the world will begin to falter under that evaluation, right? And so I think that as a starting point, perhaps is not the most correct barometer. You'll notice on Freedom Day, a lot of the public rhetoric and sentiment will be, there's nothing that to celebrate, we're not free. Therefore, there's nothing to celebrate. And I think that's very, very wrong. I think we take our civil liberties for granted sometimes in South Africa based on a comparative against our material conditions. We have a functioning electoral system. We may not have a functioning electoral act at the moment, but by and large, you and I, every few years, go to the ballot box and we cast a ballot, and there's an electoral outcomes, and those people govern us. We do that without fault, and oftentimes without the outbreak of violence, most times without the outbreak of violence. In fact, I can't remember in my adult life if we've ever had a violent, contentious election in South Africa. And I think that's a massive achievement, given that almost no other country on the continent, except for a handful of countries in SADC, is able to have a violent-free election, right? It was a massive achievement when Lesotho went to the polls last year and had a peaceful outcome. And that was something worth celebrating. In South Africa, that's what is commonly expected. And I think because it's commonly expected, we often take it for granted. That's the first. The second is we have democratic institutions that, despite concerted efforts by, I don't know, let's call them third-hand forces to destabilize these institutions, most of them are still standing and are, for the most part, functioning. Democratic institutions that either protect us or from which we are able to seek recourse. And I think the health of our institutions is something that needs a lot more of an empirical analysis based on the data. And I'll give you some of my qualitative analysis based on anecdotal evidence of conversations I have with South Africans every day. But I like the fact that our constitutions, for the most part, work. the PR may not look that way, but the Office of the Public Protector, by and large, is an office that any South African citizen can walk into. And if you had a bad experience with government or a government institution, you're able to lay a complaint. And if there was any misgovernance that had taken place there, an investigation will ensue. You may or may not get the recourse, but the fact that you can do that is something that I think is admirable about our democracy. The fact that we have other democratic institutions like our courts being mostly and largely accessible and transparent is something worth celebrating. The fact that I think that our parliamentary system itself is an open door system, whether or not that's reflected in conversation and debate on the parliamentary floor, and whether or not that's reflected in the outcomes thereof, is a different conversation. But our lawmaking process is by and large an inclusive and participatory process. Sometimes they mess it up, but then our courts protect us from that by striking down, I don't know, bills or laws that have been formulated without consulting you and I as voters and as citizens, right? You guys would remember, it's unfortunate that the process had sadly died, but you guys would remember how extensive Parliament's consulting was on the amendment to Section 25. They literally went on roadshows into every little community everywhere in the country, and South Africans of all textures and all walks of life were able to comment on what they imagine the land project of this country to be and what it should be reflected as in the law. And I think that's an important process. And so our institutions exist. They may not always be effective, but they do exist. And they exist by and large in a healthy state. Where our institutions fail, I think we start losing democratic gains, right? And that is institutions such as policing. It's beginning to, well, has long begun to fail. But it's also important to take into consideration that there are complexities there that need to be taken into consideration around why our policing begins to fail. It's not just a systematic failure, it's also a material shortcoming. For instance, if you listen to the United Nations tell us that you need one police officer for about every 250 citizens in your country, right? In South Africa, we have one police officer for about every 450 citizens in the country. So we have half the amount of police officers that we actually need. So naturally, policing is going to be ineffective and it's always going to falter. And I think once we're able to sort out the material conditions thereof, we're able to then start fixing the delivery of security and the delivery of protection. But that notwithstanding, our policing system is failing. It's deeply corrupt and the corruption in it is endemic. We need to figure out a way to fix that. And I think that's where our democracy starts losing a lot of those gains. Institutions such as our local government institutions are failing. And I think there's an opportunity to fix them. It's not failure beyond being able to be fixed. I think we still are able to fix a lot of these institutions. What lacks is the political will. Now, we often need to separate politics from democracy. And I think our politics is a broken politics. We can fix our politics through dialogue and through the democratic institutions and platforms and tools that exist. That we can use to fix our politics. We're not making full use of our democratic tools, apparatus, and infrastructure to be able to fix our politics. I think we're missing an opportunity to do so. And in fact, what we begin to do is to behave as though we don't have democratic institutions. For instance, political killings across the country. It used to be a KZN thing. It's now a South African thing, right? A mayor in the Free State's house was burned down due to political infighting, and the facade to it was that, oh no, it was just dissatisfied residents that burned the house. But the investigations are revealing that it was political infighting, right? What you're starting to see is disruptive horse trading between smaller political parties based on the mood of the leader of any of those given political parties in our different municipalities and specifically in our metros. The city of Johannesburg, for instance, is about to have its sixth mayor in the last 2 years, in the last 2.5 years. 6 mayors in a span of 2.5 years is deeply problematic, right? If you think about the fact that a lot of our municipalities are considered failed municipalities and should be taken under administration by provincial and national institutions, it is deeply worrying. But we have the tools and the apparatus to be able to fix it. I think what we lack is a number of things, and this is where our democracy becomes imperfect. We lack a great deal of civic education. I think a lot of South Africans don't quite understand to the fullest extent what our institutions do and how to access those institutions. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I am a radio broadcaster at a national broadcasting platform. A lot of the people I engage on the radio platform I'm at call in and they say things like, I have this and that problem, I need help, I don't know what to do, right? And oftentimes the answer is quite simple. Go to the office of the public protector, go to the ombudsman office, whatever ombuds they might need. It might be a financial services ombud, it might be a regulatory ombud in the banking space, it might be an ombud in SARS, for instance. There are so many of our ombud institutions that say to us on a regular basis that we have the platforms, people just don't come because they don't know about it. And I think we need civic education in that sense, right? What are our institutions? How do you access them? What do these institutions reasonably do? I think where our democracy also starts to falter is just by rights education. I think a lot of South Africans, we take for granted that we have a Bill of Rights, but a lot of South Africans do not actually know the full scope of their rights. In fact, a lot of them become surprised when you tell them what certain entitlements they have to the state or just as existing as a citizen. And these entitlements are often not accessed and exercised, not because there's an incapability to do so, but rather a lot of South Africans just don't know about it. I know the Constitutional Court went on this massive drive around trying to educate a lot of South Africans about the rights that they have and the limitations and the extent to which they can access those rights. They even printed, and if you visit the Constitutional Court or Constitutional Hill and you go on that tour, which it's a touristy thing now, is that you'll receive a constitutional booklet in a language of your choice, right? And they tried to get a constitutional booklet into every household in South Africa. The problem is no one bothered to read it. It's a lengthy document. You don't even know where to start. And so I think we do need a lot of education about just teaching South African about the law, basic principles of the law, what their rights are and how to be able to access those. And what you'll see is South Africans, once they know what is due to them, what they're entitled to, they begin to demand that. And I think that's where we have a healthy participatory democracy, where we are able to close the knowledge gap. A lot of South Africans realize that because this is entitled to me, I will demand it. And we demand it in many different ways. We demand it in protest is one of the ways within which we do it. But we often just don't do enough of that. And I think that's where our democracy is at. I think our institution exists. A lot of our institutions need strengthening. And we have an education gap between the rights, the laws that we have, as well as the entitlements we have, but also just the purpose and functioning of our institutions. And I think if we close that knowledge gap, our democracy will naturally find strengthening within that. But what we also need to continue to do, and this is why I think we have a healthy democracy, is that various arms of the state are beginning to take serious the role of accountability that they play within the state apparatus. Our courts have safeguarded us against erosion for a very long time. I think the media, as the fourth estate, is doing quite a bit to safeguard us against erosion. And I think we need to celebrate that. And I think we need to be able to protect the media as best as we possibly can. It's not perfect, and we do need to hold the media accountable for a lot of their sloppy behavior. But I think the media has done a great deal at protecting us, or at least exposing to us the rot and fraud that takes place in the state. And I think institutions like Parliament are beginning, and not always perfectly so, but are beginning to take serious the idea of visibility as well as the work of accountability. You mustn't just be accountable, you must also be seen to be accountable, right? And that's how we truly test it. And I think if we test our democracy based on that sort of criteria or that set of, I think tests, then I think we begin to realize that we have for the most part, an above average democracy. And I think it also needs to be compared to democracies around the world. And you'll realize even at that comparison, South Africa by and large is doing well. But like I said, we need to separate, I think oftentimes, democracy from politics. And also importantly, democracy from governance. A failure of governance is not automatically a failure of democracy. And we can fix those things using the tools, apparatus, and opportunities that democracy offers us. I'm going to leave it there for now.
Can we give Oliver a round of applause? given that you're experiencing load shedding and we might not have an opportunity to engage with you afterwards,
yes, I have load shedding in the next 10 minutes.
yeah. So don't worry, I won't take too long in asking some questions. I don't know if anyone in the room wants to raise a quick hand to ask questions, but from my perspective, so if the work of accessing the things that are due to us as citizens is so difficult, and you're saying we must make some sort of distinction between governance, politics, and democracy, whose work is it to make it more accessible? And if those institutions, because it's not just the political space where political parties aren't doing enough, but there's also a sense that Chapter 9 institutions themselves aren't seen to be doing sufficiently well in this country. And do you think that's only a political failure, or do you think that those institutions themselves are, I don't know, how do you categorize the sense that, because if look at the amount of organizations that exist to do the same work, for instance, as some of these Chapter 9s that essentially end up litigating on behalf of these Chapter 9s against the state. Surely, if all of the things that were promised to us were meant to be happening and be more accessible, it wouldn't need for such a significant number of civil society organizations to exist.
Yeah, look, we must also take into consideration.
Sorry. There's another hand in the room.
Okay.
Give her an opportunity to ask. The mic
Sure.
is here. You may stand up. Please stand up. Yeah. Come through, Pops. So we'll just take one more hand. Please be a bit succinct so that we don't lose him before he responds. But yeah, go for it, Pops. Yeah, it's on.
Sorry, it's not on. I can't hear that.
Sorry, Oliver. 1 second. Yeah, it's on. It's the blue tag one, Vijen.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Following what you just said now, I'm a bit shocked. How do you separate democracy from politics? Because politics based on democracy. And the second question is, you can separate government from the state. I know that. And in South Africa, the mindset of people, especially on the ground, is an example is because the ruling party is ANC, they think everything that the ANC does is from them, but it's government, which is the ANC, and the state, which is public funds, which is two different entities altogether. So how do we unfold this into the ground roots?
Yeah. So how do we make sure that this information around separation of the state and separation of the state, government, and the ruling party, but then also how do we help us understand how you got to be able to separate the politics or the political from what is democracy? Yeah. Bhekizenzwa?
Mbingelele. Ngibonge. Ngizwe la umhlonishwa ethi mhlambe ngokuhlawumpisela.
Oliver, I'll translate for you. Don't worry. Oliver is a colored boy from the East Rand, so.
Oh. Kulungile mfethu
Sure,
ngoba
sure.
ukhona ngicela ungisize.
Ungasabi, uphuthume nje baba.
Uthe ku 6.5 to 7% ngokwakhe.
I-rating yakhe,
ukuthi,
yeah.
Kodwa ngicela ukubuza yena njengoba elapha nje phambi kobuxhakaxhaka besimanje, ngabe le figure yakhe isebenzisana nogogo lapha eNdwedwe ovuthela umlilo sezothi mangabe abazukulu bezo esikoleni baphinde bawokhe, ngabe idemocracy lo kwakusho la kusebenzela ngendlela esifanayo. Ugogo angasho ukuthi naye kumsebenzele 6% noma ngahlamba ngathi u1 kuyena ngoba intuthuko ayilingani wena osuficene nayo nale abantu aba vulnerable emakhaya ababhekene nayo.
Cool. Thank you very much, Bhekizenzwa. Thank you for making it a bit short for the interest of time. So what Bhekizenzwa was saying is that your rating.
Yeah,
of
no, I got that.
Of democracy, you got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Go
Let-
for it. The response.
And maybe I'll start there, right? Because and I do want to circle back to the point I made earlier that I think evaluating democracy only based on material conditions is short-changing the gains that we've made democratically. And I think that's an important point to make. I do think that we have a serious problem of like half of South Africa, quite literally half of South Africa living in abject poverty, right? And that means that, very little progress has been made, right? But what you must realize is that poverty and poverty-related problems can be solved by using the democratic tools available to us. Whether or not we use it effectively is really up to us. And I think as a citizenry, we need to start asking ourselves those sorts of hard questions. If I live in a municipality where there's complete failure, I don't have access to clean water, I don't have a functioning sewer system. Every time I walk down the street, there's excrement in the street and it smells horrible. The roads are in terrible conditions and kids have to walk to school an hour or 2 hours just to get to school. And once they get there, they're hungry. And oftentimes the money that's supposed to feed them has been stolen, or the tender process hasn't gone well and something is wrong over there, right? If we experience that, and we experience it repeatedly, as we often do in South Africa, we have to ask ourselves, do we have the tools available to either remove those officials, to remove that regime, and to hold them accountable? And the answer is yes. But oftentimes you need resources to be able to do so, right? And this is where the role of civil society is incredibly important. Civil society has played a massive role in safeguarding and protecting our democracy. When people are getting unlawfully evicted, it is oftentimes litigation by Abahlali baseMjondolo that really protects people against those sorts of things. For instance, the city of Cape Town is in the habit of criminalizing poor people for just being poor, right? It is institutions like Abahlali that really step to the forefront and are able to do stuff that protects the poor and the vulnerable. And I think to that extent, I think we need to be able to just be grateful of the democratic institutions we have, because in many countries, if you are unlawfully evicted, that's it. You're not able to go to a court to challenge that. You're not able to get a petition going around. You're not even able to access the officials that made those decisions, right? And I think there are many countries that call themselves democracies but behave like that. And I think the fact that we generally don't have that behavior, I think means that we have access to those sorts of resources, and we need to continuously do the work at being able to access it. And I think that also answers the second question that came there around the separation, by and large, of politics and democracy. Yes, democracy is not perfect. It does produce terrible leaders, right? I mean, even the democracy that the country in the world most celebrates and want to export to other countries, United States of America, has proven to us that no matter how much faith you have in your democracy and your democratic institutions, you can still produce a recalcitrant president like Donald Trump, right? But the answer is that we have recourse to that. Can you and I walk up to our elected officials, protest to their offices, and seriously make them take into account the fact that they have produced a bad leader for us and are able to remove them through whatever processes that exist? The answer is yes. Do we often do that? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And I think when there's by and large outcry, massive civil outcry, we do see the effects coming into play. And there are a number of instances where we've seen that happen in our recent past, right? I think the Fees Must Fall protest of the 2012 to the 2016 era is proof that if you persistently protest for something, no matter how stubborn the government may be, they will listen to you. We made massive progress, not perfect progress, but we made massive progress as far as access to free education is concerned in South Africa. There's a lot that needs to still be done, but the progress thereof has been made. And that came through massive, sustained collective action, civil uprising or civil unrest, right? Civil unrest being here, I'm talking about just protest. I'm not talking about what happened in July of 2021. And so I think that's where we've made a great deal of progress. Sorry, Spa, I can't recall your first question.
Yeah, it was just around if we have to put so much effort into making this thing work, specifically in relation to, we have institutions that are meant to be doing a lot of the work that's legislated for. We have Chapter 9 institutions, for instance, but by and large, their presence is hardly felt in spaces where they ought to be. Whose work is it to actually make it work? And so in terms of the broader discussion around democracy.
Yeah, if you think about it, by and large, our Chapter 9 institutions are working. They're massively underfunded, but they're working really, really well. But you must also take into account that we have an incredibly young democracy. A lot of what we configured as our state institutions is not perfect and could be better. For instance, the Auditor General's Office, being a Chapter 9 institution, had very limited power. All they did was just investigate the fraud and corruption, but they could do nothing about it. They now have additional powers very similar to the powers of the public protector that will enable it to effect some change. If you think about the work being done by the Competition Commission or the Human Rights Commission, it's incredibly invaluable work, right? The Competition Commission has done a lot to hold corporate South Africa to account for collusive behavior that affects you and I as consumers in South Africa. The Human Rights Commission in South Africa is doing amazing work in educating the public about their rights, but also holding to account institutions and actors within the country. Think about this Penny Sparrow case, for instance. It became what it became because of the Human Rights Commission, right? And I think oftentimes we undermine those institutions because they're not a court of law or they're not a service delivery institution. And I think by and large, through partnerships between Chapter 9 institutions and civil society, we see a great deal of victories over there. And I think that's worth celebrating. Where we do have a failure is that our service delivery institutions that make up our democratic apparatus. And that is where we need to, I think, steer our attention towards fixing. I think none of our institutions are perfect just yet. And there are still ways you and I can debate about how do we strengthen some of these institutions that we have. And that's an ongoing conversation. We have a very young democracy, and so there's still ample opportunity for us to fix that.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Can we give Oliver a round of applause? We have started to experience some lag in your feed, so we do understand that you might be already load shed. We appreciate your time and appreciate your insights, and we hope to see you again soon in some of our processes. Please also do remember, Executive Director Paul Kariuki is also a good speaker. So on your late night shows, he doesn't mind staying up late. He's always sending emails at that time. So
fantastic! I'd love to have you guys there. I'd love to.
All right, have a good one. Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks a lot.
Can you give another round of applause, please? So I did say I wanted us to start with data, and Oliver did give us some ability to start to think through some of the data that we're going to process now. But of course, we have with us Preston Govindasamy, who is from the Afrobarometer, and he's going to be taking us through a couple of slides and sharing some insights from a lot of the work that Afrobarometer does. And of course, part of his presentation is doing a brief introduction into Afrobarometer as well, and so we'll allow him that levity. Preston, you may go to the front, and then we have the clicker ready for you. Can we give Preston a round of applause, please?
To be here this morning to represent Afrobarometer data in a platform such as this. I think the question of what is the value of our democracy is certainly a pertinent question. And perhaps before I get into the data and what Afrobarometer is all about, maybe I should preface with just saying what a refreshing insight from Oliver. Hey, we're so used to hearing people being disgruntled with our democracy, but I think he provides some fresh perspectives of how to view and the lens through which to look at our democracy. And I think that pretty much sums up, where we want to be. I think we should not look at the value of our democracy through sort of this narrow lens, but the more holistic we look and the more evidence we bring in and the more dialogue we bring into our conversations and space, the better we are able to actually diagnose what the problems are, right? And this is where I'll take my presentation this morning, right? What is the value of democracy, South Africans' view on elections and accountability? Why do we look at elections as an indicator or proxy for democracy? Because it's one of the most powerful ways in which we exercise our democratic rights, okay? So that is why we specifically looking at elections, okay? So generally, what is Afrobarometer? Afrobarometer is a network. It's a survey opinion poll network that conducts surveys on governance, democracy, service delivery, and social cohesion in various countries in Africa. We are Pan-African non-partisan survey research network. And so far, we've collected 8 rounds of surveys. We have just completed our 9th round at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, right? And at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, we conducted our 8th round of surveys in, I think, 39 countries in Africa. So it tells you the scale to which we are collecting survey data, right? On the continent. We are a really big brand in terms of survey opinion polls on the continent. We have quite a big footprint. The Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa, that's the institute I belong to, is in charge of implementing and overseeing surveys in 9 countries in the SADC region, okay? So that's my job. What is our goal? Our primary goal for Afrobarometer is to give public a voice in policy making, to produce scientifically reliable data and analysis on public attitudes in Africa, to broadly disseminate and apply findings, to promote democratic governance and evidence-based decision-making, and to strengthen capacity with our national partners and communication, right? So one of the primary objectives, right, is to give ordinary citizens of a country a voice. And you'll see what we go through great lengths to do this. And one of the things we do is to translate our survey into the indigenous languages in the countries that we enumerate in, right? So in South Africa, for instance, we translate into all 11 languages, and we do the same for all countries we go to. Secondly, our reach is just very vast and wide. We conduct face-to-face interviews. That means no area is unreachable for us, whether it's crossing a broken bridge or getting to the most remotest of areas, right? No area is out of reach. Why? Because our primary focus is to hear the voice of ordinary Africans, right? Or ordinary citizens in a country. And I think that's really important. So in our sampling processes, it's very rigorous. We choose nationally representative samples. What we mean by nationally representative samples is that we choose a sample so robustly that we can start making inferences or generalizations about the population based on how robust our sample is, okay? We conduct face-to-face interviews in the respondent's language of choice, and we have a standardized questionnaire that we roll out throughout all our countries. Why do we do that? Firstly, so that we can compare a single country over time. As you've heard, our survey now is in its 9th round, so we can compare our first round of surveys in 1999 all the way to our 9th round of surveys in 2022, which gives us real clout, right, to compare trends, right? And secondly, we use the standardized questionnaire so we can cross-compare countries, right? So what are countries' sentiments in the SADC region, for example? What are countries in the East versus the West saying about democracy, okay? Click, yeah. Okay, there we go, right? This is just a visual representation of our reach on the continent. And as you can see, the orange and reds are where we have our greatest footprint. The yellow, the grays and the blues are where we are still making inroads. So we've done 1 or 2 rounds, but we're still trying to make inroads. And you can see it's the countries that are very tightly ruled, okay? The Sudans, the Chads, Algeria's, etc. So now let's get into the data, colleagues. I thought it would be fitting for us to talk about where is South Africa situated in the broader continent in relation to what is the sentiment and appetite for democracy, okay? And let's look at our first slide where we're talking about the support for democracy. We asked respondents, which of these statements is closest to your opinion? Statement 1, democracy is preferable to any other kind of government. Statement 2, in some circumstances, a non-democratic government can be preferable. And statement 3, for someone like me, it doesn't matter what kind of government we have. And what you see on your right, is the percent who say democracy is preferable or the most preferable type of system by which to run a society, right? And you can see where South Africa lies on that scale in relation to all other countries, okay? In South Africa for round 8, only 40% of South Africans said that democracy is the most preferable type of government to all other options. Compared to a country like Ethiopia, where almost 90% say that democracy is preferable. That gives you sort of a context as to where South Africans see democracy and how they see democracy working, right? For only 40% of citizens to say that democracy is the most preferable type of government, I think it's quite a staggering result. And I'm not sure how you feel about that. For me, it's quite a worrisome sort of sentiment. Again, when we asked respondents, would they disapprove or approve of the following alternatives, right? Only one political party is allowed to stand for election and hold office, or the army comes in to govern the country, and elections and the national legislature are abolished so that the president can decide everything, right? We see that 65% of South Africans reject military rule. So while the taste for democracy is, or the value of democracy is quite low, the South African citizens are not going to the extremes to sort of opt for the option of the military taking over, or a one-man ruler, right, or a one-party ruler. So while you can see people dissatisfied with democracy in South Africa, they are still not biting at the alternatives, right, which is the socialist or a communist state, right? Here we go. Now with the extent to which they're satisfied with democracy, right? Now, you know, democracy can be defined as so many things. It's such a broad thing, right? But we find that South Africans generally, right, say that 37%, just over 1/3 of South Africans say that South Africa is a functioning democracy. It's a good democracy, but with minor problems. That ties into a large extent of what Oliver had mentioned before, is yes, we on a scale from 1 to 10, we're about a 6.5, 7, right? But we have some minor problems. And that generally is the by and large sentiment of South Africans as well, where just over 1/3 say that, right? And 35% are satisfied with the state of democracy in the country. So we can see that still 65% of citizens are not satisfied, right? If only 35% of South African citizens are satisfied with democracy, it tells us that 65% are not. So the vast majority, almost 2/3 of South Africans, are not satisfied with the way democracy works in our country. Now to focus and hone in on South Africa particularly, right? We asked various questions about elections, about the IEC and the way elections work, right? And let's see what our latest data says about elections, right? We see that 52%, so just over half of all South Africans, say that thinking about the last election held in 2019, it didn't work very well. It wasn't very effective, right? So it didn't work very well or not at all, right? That is the vast majority of South Africans, right? We see this in the context of the SADC region, and still again, right? There are other countries like Eswatini who are very much more disgruntled with the way the elections work. But South Africa is still up there. Now we move on to support for elections. We asked respondents in this country, how free are you to choose who you vote for without feeling pressured, right? 67% say they don't feel pressured at all, right? Or they're not very pressured, which is a really good indicator. As Oliver had mentioned before, that in his adult life, he hasn't seen a violent protest during elections or a violent contestation during elections. And this sort of is also the public sentiment. 67% say that they have not felt any pressure about who to vote for, right? Support for elections. When we asked respondents, which of the following statements do you choose? We should choose our leaders in this country through regular, open, and honest elections, or we should say, since elections sometimes produce bad results, we should adopt other methods for choosing the country's leaders, right? We see that 35% agree very strongly that we should choose leaders through elections, and 19% say that we should choose leaders through elections. So again, we're seeing that just almost 50% or more than 50% of the country says that elections are the mechanism by which we should choose our country's leaders. I would say a low minority are saying that we should use other methods for choosing leaders, okay? Support for multi-party competition. Again, we see good support for multi-competition. I think it's the public sentiment that a multi-party system is a most robust system for a healthy democracy, okay? Now we see that we look at what are the participation rates for elections, okay? Respondents were asked in the last national election in 2019, did you vote or not? Or were you too young to vote? Or can't you remember whether you voted, right? So respondents who were too young to vote are obviously excluded from this analysis, right? We see that 55% said that they voted in the last election, but a staggering 38% said of eligible voters, 38% of eligible voters said that they did not vote, right? And I think this is a growing trend in South Africa. If we look at the election rates and turnout rates to the polls from 1994 to 2019, we see a constant decline of people turning out to the polls, specifically in the areas of youth. We see ages 18 to 34 are really neglecting turning out to the polls, and we see this in this data as well. We also asked, thinking about the last national election, did you attend a campaign or rally? Did you work for a candidate or party? Or did you contact a political party representative, right? We see 84% of our respondents said that they had not attended a campaign or rally. That shows you that there is really no appetite to go to rallies, to listen to what political leaders have to say. Perhaps the narrative is old, perhaps the narrative is stale, perhaps it's just a sentiment of it's the same thing over and over again. And so there's really no appetite for attending political campaigns or rallies among the citizenship of South Africa, right? We move on to quality and legitimacy of elections, right? We asked, did you think in 2019, the last election was free and fair? And I'd cast your eye to the bottom red line, right? The line right at the bottom, right? Can you see how in 2011, right? Only 2% or 3% said the election was not free and fair at all. But in 2019, right? Almost 13% said that the election was not free and fair. That shows you that there's an increasing sentiment, right? That people are not happy with the efficacy, the transparency, and accountability of how elections are conducted. And this speaks to the many instances of people finding ballot boxes on the side of the road, et cetera, right? And the news and the media really covering and unpacking those instances. So we see that 13% in our last survey said that the election was not free and fair at all. I don't think it's a staggering finding, but I think it is a cause for growing concern. We also asked if respondents felt that they were sort of personally put in a position of fear or becoming a victim of political intimidation or violence during elections, right? and 83% said a little or not at all. Again, to Oliver's comment, the institutions are working, right? The last election was not violently contested, right? And so that plays out in the data as well. So you can see that the public sentiment is that some institutions are working. When it comes to the crunch, like holding a national general election, there seems to be a law and order and a peaceful election. I can't tell you what the sentiments towards 2024 will be, but this is just based on the last election. We also asked respondents if they think that their vote is a secret, right? 54% said not at all or not likely. Right, this is sort of a humorous one, but it goes to tell you what the public sentiments around like what states sort of control or state regulation is, right? Where 54% say that they don't think that their vote was a secret, okay? We asked whether respondents felt that the media adequately covers all candidates. 28% say sometimes, but 26% say never. Perhaps sort of an inkling to whether the state has captured the media or not, but I'll leave that for your consumption. Voting accuracy. We asked in the past election, how often did each of the following things happen? People's votes were not accurately counted or not fairly reflected in the results, right? Or people voted more than once. We see that 44% say that votes were not accurately counted and 50% say that people were counted more than once. This also is quite an alarming sentiment, and it relates to trust in the IEC, right? Is there significant citizen trust in the IEC to count properly and accurately and double count people, right? And the sentiment is that, well, the IEC is not as effective as they claim to be. We asked about the accuracy of announced results in the most recent elections. With regard to the last national election in 2019, to what extent do you think the results announced by the IEC accurately reflected the results as counted, right? We see that 60% said that it was mostly accurate with some minor problems. 26% said that it was not accurate at all. So just almost 30% saying that it was not accurate at all or not very accurate. So with major discrepancies. But I think here the majority of South Africans say that it was mostly accurate with some minor problems. We also asked if a political party or candidate offered food, gifts, or some sort of reimbursement for attending a rally or for their vote. We see that 11% said once or twice, but 79% say several times, right? That goes to show you the nature of how the political system works, especially during the time close to elections, okay? Now we look at trust and giving up democratic elections. And I think this is an important thing, colleagues, because it goes to show us how trusting citizens are in the democratic process and in democratic processes versus choosing other alternatives and other systems of government. And I think this is really important. We asked if respondents feel close to any particular party. You would see the red line, not the orange line, the red line indicates yes, they feel close to a political party. And you can see how in 2000, it started very strongly with 50% or just over 50% of respondents saying that they feel close to a party. But look how that has declined over time. In 2015, only 23% of South Africans feel that they are close or loyal to a party. It shifted up in 2018 but I think as the drive for the 2019 elections took off, people may have felt that they are loyal to a party, but see how again, after 2018, it has dropped to only 32% of South Africans feel loyal or close to one particular party. So you can see in sort of the open landscape, people are open to options. Whether that results in a different outcome in the ballot box is a different story. But people are saying that they are open to the variety of options available to them. Okay, when we asked people if they are close to a party, this is just broken down by age group, okay? We see that, let's look at KZN. 65% of respondents said they feel close to a party, right? 76% of respondents between 18 and 24 years old say they're close to a party. But those 55 years and older, which is counterintuitive, right? Say that they don't feel close to a party. When you look at level of schooling and education, 2/3 of post-secondary education South Africans are loyal to a particular party. We also asked our respondents what their level of trust is in the following institutions, okay? And we listed a whole range of government institutions, and we asked what their level of trust is, right? Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, the majority of South Africans feel that they have a lot of trust in the independent broadcaster, right? And the lowest level of trust occurs at the grassroots level. If you look at the last line, local council, there is very limited trust for government at a grassroots level. So you can see, as Oliver explained, right? There is trust in the national institutions, the IEC, the public protector, the ombudsman, right? Etc. But when it comes to grassroots local government, right? Local council, there is very little trust, with 72% saying they trust their local council just a little or not at all. And I think that is where the majority of our problems lie, at the grassroots level of our democracy. We also asked about trust in parliament, and you can see trust in parliament has statistically significantly decreased from 2006 to 2021, from 54% reporting that they have somewhat or a lot of trust in parliament, to now in the latest round, 28%, right? So it's showing you how trust in institutions generally are on the decrease, okay? Trust in the IEC, same story, okay? Decline over time. We also asked this interesting question: would you disapprove or approve of the following alternatives? Elections and parliament are abolished so that the president can decide everything, right? You would think it's a strange question to ask, but let's look at the results, right? Increasingly over time, South Africans are approving of this alternative, right? Why are they approving this alternative? Because they are choosing services, employment, and jobs, right, over democracy, right? Again, I don't think it's an alarming statistic, but I think it is cause for concern because the trajectory is increasing over time. So as you can see from 2011, only 15% approve of a one-man ruler, right? But in 2021, 25.3% approve of a one-man ruler, right? That trajectory seems to be on the incline. We'll wait for round 9 to see if it increases even more. So again, not staggeringly alarming, but I think rise for concern. One of our colleagues at CDE, Anne Bernstein, she released a paper in the SADC region about the growing and alarming rates of youth unemployment in the country, right? And in countries in the SADC region. And one of the findings from that research suggested that when there's a large group of youth unemployment, or a large percentage of youth unemployment, one of the things that tend to happen is you have increased restlessness, right? And you create the space for more revolutionary behavior. Sometimes if you look at countries like Mozambique, it results in even terrorist behavior, right? So again, there's this concern that a growing pool of unemployed youth, right, causes an increased level of restlessness for very, very revolutionary ideas, like a one-man leader, right? We also asked if a non-elected government or leader could impose law and order, deliver houses and jobs, how willing would you be to give up regular elections to live under such a government, right? And this is the percent of people who said they are willing and very willing to give up a democratic government, right, just for services and jobs, right? If you look at it, right, in the Eastern Cape, 72%, right, of people in the Eastern Cape said they are willing to take on such an option, right? If we look at those who are in high lived poverty or moderate lived poverty, again, 66 and 73% of citizens who live under high lived poverty and moderate lived poverty say that they are willing to give up democratic elections, right, for services and jobs, okay? Again, when we look at those with an educational level, we see that those with primary school education are also more than 67% are willing to give up their election right, their democratic right to vote for jobs and for services. Now, this is alarming, right? This is something that we should take note of as civil society. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll conclude with maybe 2 points. So what does this mean, all this data mean for the policymaker? Well, it simply means that there is a growing concern that our democracy is becoming more and more vulnerable. It's not at a point of where we're reaching a critical mass, right? But we're seeing a definitive trend that is becoming more and more vulnerable, right? And secondly, we're seeing that more and more young people and they opting to choose not to exercise their democratic rights are becoming an increasing trend, which is also a concern, as I mentioned before. What does it mean for us, the layman and civil society, is that there continues to be increased restlessness in society about the way our government functions, how it operates, and who we hold into account. So I'll leave you with those 2 thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Preston, for your insights. No, you can join us in the front, back at your seat for now. We'll take Umam Zandile before we engage in a Q&A with the both of you. Thank you very much for your presentation and insights. We really appreciate the lengths to which IJR and the Afrobarometer is able to go in engaging with the different stakeholders, specifically around their feelings around the different sentiments. I think the idea around elections and whether elections yield the results that people want is an interesting one, specifically one in light of the new Electoral Amendment Act now, but also in relation to the fact that turnout continues to be low. And what then that means for the ways in which people are able to exercise their rights. Too often in this country, when we talk about democracy, when we talk about the fight against apartheid, we reduce it to the franchise, so the ability for people to vote, and we think that's it. And clearly, people are showing that we didn't just want to vote. There was more to this, but we aren't seeming to find ways around articulating what the more is and what the more is that we actually want. People feel that on a broader level, the quality of life that they're able to engage with and access means that the franchise is too far away. It's too late every 5 years for me to start to think about going to vote, when my lived experience at the moment is of a particular nature. So in that regard, I'd like to welcome. So when I said Mam Zandile, I didn't mean Mam Zandile Gumede of. So I'm going to invite Mam Zandile from the from Abahlali baseMjondolo, who's going to give us an insight in terms of what is the work of Abahlali, what is the constituency saying about the quality of our democracy, and what is the call that they are making to citizens as we go into the celebration or commemoration of Freedom Day. They have a poster out at the moment that speaks to the march that they're going to be leading, that's called Unfreedom Day, and help us to think through what are the issues at the core of your call in relation to that. Siyabonga. Simshayele izandla. Let me see.
Amandla. Amandla. Qina mhlali qina. Qina mhlali qina. Yeah. Ngithi qina mhlali qina because we are all the residents of South Africa. Umhlali means resident. So they said I must unpack the Unfreedom Day. Firstly, I would like to narrate what is Abahlali baseMjondolo mean. Abahlali baseMjondolo are the Sheikh Dwellers movement in South Africa. They are fighting for justice, human rights, and equality for all South African citizens. Our main focus is on land, housing, and dignity. We are fighting for these three things because we have seen that since 1994, as Abahlali baseMjondolo had been promised a better life for all, but nothing yet. So on 26 April, we'll be having a peaceful march from Courage Fountain to the City Hall. We will be giving our memorandum to the Office of the President because you have been giving a lot of memorandums to the eThekwini municipality, to the provincial of KwaZulu-Natal, but nothing is happening. We are not saying something will happen if we send a memorandum to the national government, but we know that South Africa is broken. South Africa is in ICU. For true, South Africa is in ICU. So even the people lost their hope on politicians. We as civil society, we need to make sure that we are speaking with one voice, because everyone is watching us as civil society about what's happening in South Africa. They want to hear our voices. We know as Abahlali, we say we are not free because we have been promised a better life for all. But nothing is happening. What is happening is that there is free education, but that on that free education, some of the politicians are using that free education to eat. They are eating. We have seen that on NSFAS. There are children who are having access on NSFAS while they don't qualify because their parents are rich. They are using this NSFAS to enrich themselves. So we can't say we have a free education, because those people who are poor, they are applying for NSFAS. Sometimes they don't qualify, but those who are rich, they do qualify for NSFAS, because those people who are on top, they want to get a cut from these children. You know what happened to the child who was given about 14,000 rand. That child was, according to myself, I'll say it's not her fault to be given that money. The problem is that she didn't send that money back. The fault is for someone who's inside there who gave the child. Someone gave the child the money because he or she wanted a card from the child. So even on this free education, there's a lot of loopholes. There's a high level of poverty. We don't have an economy, freedom of economy. We don't have, because now we know that if we are over 35, you can't be employed. You are not allowed to apply for government vacancies because you are over 35. So what are we going to do? Because we got our grandchildren. Our grandchildren depended on us. So we are looking for a job as the people who are more than 35 years. And even the pension is starting at the age of 60. So what are we going to do? We are not free at all. The other thing is that there's a lot of inequality. If we say there's a lot of inequality, it's because as Abahlali, we experienced a lot of political killings, but some of the people didn't got arrested. Last year, we lost about four leaders within a period of, in March, April, May, we lost about 4 leaders. We lost Comrade Umnguni in August, who was a chairperson of a Kenana branch. Nobody got arrested since August. We even tried to get hold of Minister Cele, but unsuccessfully. We didn't get hold of him. He said we must talk to Mkwanazi, the commissioner of KZN, and even Mkwanazi was nowhere to be found. So AKA died, everyone was mourning. Everyone was mourning. Even now, everyone wants to know who killed AKA. So there is inequality. It depends who are you. If you don't have money, you won't get justice. Cost of living is very high. Cost of living is very high. We are unemployed. We are unemployed because of load shedding. We know some of the staff, some of the branches in KFC decided to close because of this load shedding. Some of the branches in Pick n Pay decided to close because of this load shedding. We are not free because some of the people who got the good cards for political parties are getting jobs. You're getting job according to the political card. Even if they are looking for the people to just to sweep the road, you must come with a card for the certain political party. I won't say the ANC only, because even if you are, even the IFP, all over, the people are even joining these political parties because they want to find jobs. And these jobs are giving people some peanuts. So we are not free. So we experienced floods last year in April. The people are still living in the community halls, others are in the tenders. But the government promised us that last year, October, all the people will be on their houses, on their transit camps. We are not free. The rate of gender-based violence and femicide is very high. We are having a problem that the DNA is taking too long. You're having a problem that as activists of GBVF, you find out that there's a lot of rights to the offenders. The offenders got a lot of rights. You find out that the perpetrators will get bail and kill and go and kill the victims while he is on bail. These bail are oppressing us as GBVF activists. So we are not free. We are not free at all. The corruption. Under corruption, I mentioned that NSFAS issue. All RDP houses contractions are frozen now. They are frozen because of corruption. We used to engage with the Minister of Human Settlement, nationally and provincial. They say the money is there. The problem is that who will be giving the tender? The people are fighting for tenders while we are waiting for houses. That's a problem. We are not free at all because the people are putting profits before us. So there's no equality. They don't think about us. We are voting. You have seen the premier went to Wandenge's sports ground during this weekend. She came with the food parcels, but she wanted to speak about eradicating of crime. She came with the food parcels. Food parcels were like this. A lot of food parcels. What is that? It's a bribery. It's a bribery. I can tell you that the ANC is desperate now. They are desperate. I'm sorry if there's someone who got the trust, who's still trusting ANC. They are desperate. They are desperate. They can do anything to get the vote from us as civil society. You know, now they didn't care about us anymore. But you have seen there was a shake fire at Ispingo. Mamu Ngobeni went there on Tuesday. But we used to have shake fires. They don't care. They don't even want to know how many people got affected on those shake fires. But now, because we are going to vote next year, they came as soon as they can. They are desperate. So for us, as civil society, we need to unite and speak with one voice. I'm happy that the president signed that election bill. So now it's upon us as civil society that what are we going to do in order to free us? Because we have to free ourselves. We know that the ANC take us from Egypt, but we didn't reach Canaan. We are still on the field. They left us on they didn't even let us cross the Red Sea. We didn't cross the Red Sea. The Red Sea is still there. We need Moses who will help us to cross the Red Sea. And that Moses will come from the civil society. I'm telling you. We won't get any Moses from political parties, can change political parties, can vote for DA, vote for the ANC, vote for IFP, vote for EFF, anything. They're all bunch of liars. They are all bunch of liars. They are all bunch liars. They're making us a step to go on top. Then when they're on top, they'll be sneezing on you. They'll be sneezing on you. Yeah, that's what is happening. We are not free at all. So since we say we are having an Unfreedom Day, it's because we are not free. We are not free. We voted for democratic government, which is the government which was elected by the people, which is the government for the people. But this government is not for us. It's not for us. It's 29 years now. We are still fighting. We are going to the streets. Why? Because nothing is happening. It's only promises, 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 lies, 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 lies. So, comrades, we need to unite and speak with one voice in order to free ourselves. Amanda!
Siyabonga kakhulu, Ma, for your reflections. I think a lot of the stuff seems to follow. And I think insofar as the material conditions that Oliver had started to speak about, Abahlali are speaking directly to them in the ways in which they go about their campaign. And I think it's important that when we come back from tea, we take an opportunity to start reflecting on some of this terminology. What is freedom? What is democracy? What is political participation, and all of those things for ourselves, so that when we make a comparative analysis of where these things are, we are doing so based on a shared understanding of where we're going. Because I think sometimes we critique the wrong things because we're not speaking about the same exact thing, right? And because we don't have the same understanding, or sometimes certain terminology is used loosely by politicians on purpose in order to elude us from what it is that we're meant to be talking about. I heard someone earlier this week, there's a program of government called poverty alleviation, and that's like the aim of what government is trying to drive. But it's like all alleviation actually means just make it slightly better, but it doesn't mean get rid of poverty. So why are we aiming so low when it comes to the things that we want to talk about and actually achieve for ourselves as citizens in this country? Had another conversation on Tuesday with some gender-based GBVF, gender-based violence and femicide activists, and a lot of them in the room were saying, actually, yes, we're activists. Yes, we're community leaders in our spaces, but we're not interested in voting. And that was alarming, because my thing is, if you're an activist, if you're a civil society stakeholder and you're working at drafting policy to submit to Parliament for them to enact that and legislate for that, to whom are you giving that mandate? Who's going to be writing this policy? Will they be receptive to your message? Are you thinking about that? And so I'd like for us to go to tea to digest that, but also to digest what's outside for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. We'll come back after 15 minutes. So at 11:10, if you could reconvene and continue with the rest of our program. For those joining us online, hopefully there's no load shedding where you are. If there is, maybe some tap water and juice will do. But we will reconvene at 11:10. All right, colleagues, let's head back and settle down back to our seats, please. Are we all right? Are we doing okay? All right, let's get back, guys. I forgot to give what is the word? The disclaimer that it was tea. It wasn't lunch. And so unfortunately, for those of you who waited and sort of took your time to go outside, you might not have received everything that was due to you, but we do apologize for that. And I hope others are recognizing that when it's tea, and then lunch will come later, and then we can. I think at lunch is much easier to dish as much as you want. Yeah, it's more relaxed. But yeah, ukudla sikukhulumile, so it's just passing thoughts. Guys, it's not that deep. Right. So back to today's discussion. Before we went on break, we heard from Oliver in the morning discussing that perhaps the disgruntledness that comes with people talking about our democracy as though it's a democracy deferred, it's something that people aren't feeling. It's more about the material conditions that people are engaged with, that they face, that they deal with at the different spaces that they occupy. Oliver then went on to say that perhaps it's important that we do not become disingenuous in our critique of democracy when we think about the ways in which our lived experiences are affecting us. The ways in which we're able to access certain goods, certain services is not ultimately only a result of the structure of our democracy, but it's about also what political will is available and what are the institutions that are meant to be supporting the political will, but also the instruments of government in order to give effect to what's in the Constitution. And so it's not primarily a critique of democracy. And beyond that, potentially we don't always use the tools available for us to demand the things that we feel are due to us. And ultimately, part of the blame is also on us. And in a way that says that your lack of awareness isn't also it's not something that's a mistake. You, as a citizen, not knowing certain things is also quite a political choice by those in power in order to keep certain things in abeyance in the ways in which you access certain levels of information. Civil society has become an important stakeholder and continues to become an important stakeholder in ensuring that some of these things are addressed, but they are also in need of support in a lot of ways. The data that's come out from the Afrobarometer survey as presented by Preston gives varying levels of discomfort with our institutions, one, a lack of trust in the electoral process, a lack of trust in the institutions that are meant to be running our society or making sure that we give effect to what's in our Constitution. And that becomes something that we need to think clearly about in terms of where we're headed. A News 34 article it came out around, I think one of the data sets came out and the headline was, people prefer, what was it, a dictator over a benevolent dictator over a democratically elected president. And of course, sometimes those titles might be misleading, but the essential understanding that data says is that people would prefer if there was a guarantee that someone would come into power and actually provide the services, provide the goods that citizens, provides all of the goods. She hasn't been around for years, so that's why I'm isolating her out separately. But yeah, so providing the goods that citizens deserve, they would rather not have the right to vote, because ultimately for them, the right to vote is separate from all of these things that they don't feel that they're getting. What we then heard from Abahlali Basemjondolo, we had a sort of an unpacking of what are all of these things, the material conditions that people are confronted with, the ideas of corruption, the ideas of lack insofar as access to services, a lack insofar as the lack to access to justice and the instruments of justice moving slower, the idea that you are only able to access certain spaces because you have money or when you have money, and if you don't have money, then you don't have access to a real legitimate justice in this country. And so those are the material conditions that they are concerned with. The ways in which government responds to different people is different based on the profile of that individual. Are you a card-carrying member? Are you close related to a certain individual in office? What's your profile, and what does it mean for the ways in which they engage with you is ultimately a determinant to whether or not you're able to live a meaningful life in this country. And so when they talk about unfreedoms, they talk about the sense that they don't feel like their citizenship is given fully to them as citizens of this country as a result of this neglect that we've seen from the party political space, from the governance space. And so when they put out these memorandums and there's a lack of action, it's a demonstration that government doesn't see them. It's a demonstration that political parties don't see them. And I say them loosely because it's also us who are in the different spaces that we occupy. There's a call from Abahlali then in the closing sentiments to say, we feel that all of these things, the partisanship, the card carrying, being a member, being a voter, and voting specifically for this current political sort of the parties that are currently available won't change anything. It's up to civil society to decide what the trajectory of South Africa ought to be moving forward. And that's my summation of things, but of course, I'm sure you picked up different hints of things as well. So what I'd like to ask at your tables is that you talk for the next 10 minutes around what was significant or what still lingers for you about the things that were mentioned in the morning as one part. The second part is when you heard and when you saw the invitation around talking about and unpacking the value of our democracy, what are some of the things that lingered for you? What were you thinking about before you came here? What were you hoping to hear? Have you heard it? And if you haven't heard it, what still remains to be said for you? Yeah, that's what I'd like you to talk about. Of course, we also have a resource here through Mike, and he's been one of the vocal voices against the current act, Electoral Amendment Act, but he's also been pragmatic and saying, if we hold off on this thing for too long, it means we might have put our elections in jeopardy for next year. And by the looks of things, if these organizations do take this thing to court in this immediate term, it means that our elections next year are somewhat in jeopardy insofar as whether or not they can be held, but also whether or not they can be held in a way that is legitimate and constitutional, because potentially the Constitutional Court, if they decide to hold off on answering that question until after the election, and then they come out after that and say, actually, yeah, this act is not constitutional or doesn't give weight to the judgment that we gave in 2020, then it ultimately means whoever's the president at that point in time is somewhat illegitimate. But that's a debate I think we can have post-2024 elections. But I think it's something that we need to keep in mind as we have this conversation about what freedom, democracy, and this party political space means for us as citizens and as people who are active in the space. Did I talk too fast? So that's what I'd like you to talk about at your tables. 10 minutes. Yeah, enjoy. All right, colleagues, let's wrap up our conversations. Let's wrap up our conversations. Okay, do we have any volunteers for giving feedback in terms of what you were discussing at your tables? Any hands? There's a hand here, yes, Sheldon. Mpunego. And one of the ladies at the back. Sure. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 for now. Can we start with you, Sheldon? You're letting us know what you were talking about, what the discussion is around. Yeah. Oh, you're finalizing. Okay. Pegzenzo, send it right in. You ready to present? Oh, God. Punego, come through, please. You can use the one at the back or. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, number 5.
Hello, let me lean in.
Yes, please. Please lean in unless you can raise it up without breaking it.
I know, I'll just lean in.
Okay, cool.
I don't want to alter the stand.
All right, colleagues, can we listen up?
I'll start off with our impressions now.
Yeah.
From when we were coming here. So around the table, one of the things that came out were our first impression was when we were unpacking South Africa's democracy, we were expecting to hear issues around the current unemployment rate, the current law around voting that has been the discussion. We're expecting to hear, things around basically these standard of living that is actually deteriorating in terms of the quality for normal people. And we're also speaking about, now into the actual discussion we started, we spoke about how the 6.5 scale that we were given in the first half of the show is actually not 6.5 for everybody. So is that 6.5 maybe for a person who has everything within the country already, or is a 6.5 that's accommodative of a person who's from a very rural area? So when we now spoke about that in our table, we also figured that that 6.5 probably does cater for a well-off person, because in another scenario, you wouldn't say 6.5, considering the fact that communities go days without water, without electricity, basic service delivery, basically. It isn't even efficiently given to people in a 6.5 quality, you know? And then we also spoke, what else did we speak about? Just that it's the 6.5 that, you know, that we spoke about the most. And we spoke about Freedom Day as well, as to are we now, in a general sense, South Africans considering also giving away their, you know, autonomy or freedom for the general good of just service delivery, you know, and a couple of examples came up that, you know what, maybe in some instances, people actually just do want the basics, and the right to vote and stuff like that isn't freedom, or what freedom is to you isn't what freedom is to me. Yeah, over there, that's what we were speaking about.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can give him a round of applause, yes? It's an interesting idea that freedom is also quite a personal thing for different people. So there's a broad definition and terminology around what freedom is and ought to be, but personally, there are instances where you can question how you're receiving and engaging with your freedoms from a very personal level, and we hear you, understand. Thank you very much for your contribution. I think Sheldon is now ready. If we can give him a round of applause just to encourage him to come to the front. Oh, okay.
Okay. I came up here on purpose. There's an example why I came on top here. I'm making an example of our politics, our politicians, sorry. They say vote for us, we equal, but we don't act equal with them. This is a politician seat, that's the voter seat. Why must the voter be less than a politician and talk down there, but the politician must be on top here? But when we vote, they say we equal. So where's equality in that? It's just an example. I'm not saying that DDP is doing that. It's just an example of how the political world works with us. But then we're voting, they'll come in our community, give us food parcels, people can have photos with us, come and eat our pap and wors with us to show how equal we are. But once they get voted, they eat caviar and lobster only. All right. That's not what we spoke about, man. That's just my introduction. Because I see coaxing me and the throw things at me. One of our main things was from the first speaker, I think it was the separation of democracy and politics. They're saying that we cannot separate the two, but they separated it. That was one of our main issues. And then the stats guy, no offense, it's just a question. By the way, we love the fact that we saw stats, we saw what's going on. But the main question was stats subject based from who? Because I know, well, this wasn't a question I asked, it was a question someone else asked, but I also had a personal experience with stats. My sister named, not my blood sister, I'm calling her sister because I don't say her name. She was busy with the stats and she was driving the guys around, and she was in my area. Well, one of the areas that I work in. And she phoned me, hey, Sheldon, can you send Nicholas? I'm going to.
No. I'm just checking. I'm just trying to. As a facilitator, you must feel the room. You know, feel the room. If it's too cold here, let the people know so that you can make it better. You know, carry on. Sorry.
Something that I can go over pause. I'm not checking.
No, we're still with you. We're trying to listen. Don't take too long.
I'll try.
Sure.
What time's lunch?
No. Carry on.
Okay. On the personal experience from stats, as that right, like I'm saying, they were driving around and they're broken down in one of my areas. So then she called me and she said, hey, Sheldon, we found with the stats and the vehicles, look, it's going to be a whole day thing. So can you come off us, drive us around, we'll give you some petrol and whatnot. So when I picked them up and then I was like, where are we going to? He said, no, we're going here to this road here where the old age home is. So I took them there, I dropped them off. They had like 10 surveys, they were asking questions. Then I waited for them like maybe like for an hour, picked them up. I said, where to next? We're going to another area now. So I said, you're in this area and you're only attending old age home. I'm like, yeah, it's what we were told where to go. I said, but the old age home people, and I looked at the question. I'm like, but old age home people don't experience unemployment. They don't experience potholes. Only thing I think they experience is load shedding because then they can't use their green oxygen tin. But what I'm trying to say is they're asking people that the problems won't affect. So then they get positive answers. And I'm not saying you'll do that. It's just an experience of stats. Maybe you should bring it to a room like this and say, guys, listen, those areas we want to do stats. Who can come put their name down? I'm link with you all, from you all, we call those areas. I mean, all of us here were involved in our areas. And I think we're the quickest link to the people. And we know who's at home, who can come to community hall. Like they said, just offer a meal, see the whole community there. So with that, I think we need to get more involved so we can assemble people for you and the people that are actually dealing with the problems that we're speaking about. Okay. Then there was another one, third speaker has highlighted. He said, oh, yeah, speaking about grassroots, my comrade, when I used to be a comrade, now I'm a child of God. I saw the easiest way out, and I took it. I heard the voice of the Lord, so I went this way. Yeah, they felt that there wasn't enough put in how we get a solution to the problem. They understood that you came with problems, but they felt that it was all over the show. It wasn't.
Right.
So
Sheldon, interesting critique. What were some of the things that you guys felt? One, you were intending to come to the space to be able to hear, and what are the issues that are still lingering? Perhaps the ways in which you engage in the critique is unfair to the speakers, on especially the last speaker, as you mentioned.
No, 100%.
Because of the type of organization that they come from.
Yes.
For Preston, I know he's more than happy to talk about how sampling works for the purposes of gathering data. But yeah, maybe
No.
What was the broader discussion around the issue and actually coming to grips with freedom and democracy and what it means to you at the table, as opposed to just sort of putting it on the presenters to have sort of fulfilled every desire and need that you might have needed.
100%,
Yeah.
right? 100%. And then that's why they didn't want me to speak, because I want to say my own thing, but unfortunately, I had to follow what they wrote down as a group.
Cool.
And I think when the invite came out, I got excited about this because now PDP has the opportunity to bring these various speakers, and then we need to ask these various questions. And then when I came here, like I'm saying, I was hoping to unpack a lot, and then it's coming slowly but surely. I'm not 100% there, but like we asking the questions, the answers.
What's missing for you at your table in the discussions that you had? So beyond what you might have not heard from the speakers, what are the things that you're grappling with? What are at the core of your constituencies and communities? Maybe let me say this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to present again, but have a brief discussion with your group so that you can come contribute around that. We appreciate, I think, the first part of your presentation around the design of certain spaces, how spaces are designed and how they implicitly create a power mismatch between citizens and the political elite. That's a real thing, and that we're conscious of it. That's why even when we have speakers right now, there's mics and stuff available in front, but they don't have to sit there. It's a choice as well. Sometimes it feels like a trap, but to see what people will mostly gravitate towards. But it's a legitimate choice. No, so Sheldon, you can sit for now. We'll give you another opportunity. And so we'll give him a round of applause. So those are the things that we'd like to hear. What are you battling with? So that we can, when we talk about these definitions, not just about what the speaker said, but maybe in spite of what the speaker said, or in support of what the speaker said, or because of what the speaker said, This is where we are as communities. This is where we are as citizens. This is where we are as activists. This is where we are as academics, etc. Okay. I note your hand, but the other hand will have to go to first. Ma'am at the table there. Okay, we'll come back there. I think after Sir here. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. First, they got me into speaking, and now they want me to stand on the stage. I'm
Sheldon started a thing here.
I'm Kharda from Safe Cities Forum, and my apologies for being late this morning. I am coming from a very important engagement every Thursday morning. Well, on my way here, I've given it some thought as well. Unfortunately, I missed the sessions before the break. But concerning the value of our democracy and thinking that next year we'll be celebrating 30 years of our democracy. And 30 years is an entire generation. And I'm looking at the young people today and thinking, do they really value our democracy? Because if you look at it, many of them don't even know the value of it because they have not been through it the way that we have been through it. And you may look at me now and say, but you white, you haven't been through it. No, the apartheid has affected all of us, not only those who are white. It has just been affecting, but we were all victims. We were all slaves of the apartheid regime. And I feel that focus has to be put on young people who have to come into this space of understanding what value, how valuable our democracy really is. The way that we'll be able to do that, we discuss this around the table, is education in our community, grassroots level, and also through interfaith movements or religious, the religious sphere, and every other domain. We have to impact every domain, the educational domain, not only having this in history books, but speaking to young people on a practical level to really understand how valuable this is. And something that you value is something that you will protect. And I want to know, how far are we actually going to protect this democracy? One of the important things, and people at the table understood that I'm very passionate about this, is the issue of the Amendment Act. And I'm also part of an organization called New Nation Movement, who have been working on the case, that has been to court, and especially with regards to the voting of independent candidates. Or independent candidates standing for elections. And I want to say that every community must have somebody who they can trust. It doesn't matter who they are, what color or age, or who they are, what gender they are from, but it must be somebody that the community can trust, who can say that this person is worthy of standing for as an independent candidate for election. Now, obviously, we're still waiting for the legalities of that, but there has to be a liberation campaign to get back to all to the people, and the people shall govern, which was the original mandate of our democracy. So the people of South Africa have to stand up and say that and understand that our amendment, our voting election policies are actually unconstitutional. It has been proven unconstitutional in court. And we have to stand up to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, tough one, because I think Umar talked about Moses and parting of the Red Sea earlier, and now we're at the point at a policy level where we're thinking about potentially the impact of independent candidates, and what is different from what people mostly understood from the Constitutional Court judgment is that purely on the way in which the ANC and those in Parliament chose to read it on a very sort of surface level basis, is that independent candidates must be allowed to contest at national and provincial elections. That's all they read into it. But on the other hand, what civil society has also been driving for as part of this conversation is, how do we use this amendment to increase the accountability and transparency. So how can we better access the ability to hold these people to account for the promises that they made? Because there's been a significant failure from the party political space to actually be accountable to citizens as opposed to the party and their bosses, inside that space. And so that hasn't been fixed. And we also should be cautious of putting too much onto independent candidates as though they will be the messiahs. There's no Superman, there's no one man, no one person who's going to change the system and its impact on us as individuals in the different spaces that we occupy. But how do we all collaboratively come together to make sure that it starts working in our favor? But yeah, as a general sentiment, that's what I wanted to add to that part. Pegizenzo? Yeah, so it's going to be Pegizenzo. After Pegizenzo, there was someone else who I pointed to? Not yet? Okay, so it is here, 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 and there. Okay. Yeah, Boba.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Siyawazi my comrade. Well, all right, come on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Greetings to the room. Well, in our table, my name is Pegizenzo Mabaso. I come in from Maran Hill area.
He's one of the people that received the food parcels, by the way, last weekend.
Yes. Yeah, I was there, but I not received it. All right. Well, in our table, we started looking at the democracy as an individual, and then we went to say that one of the problems is the system that we are living under. So the system will explain itself as I speak. Just please
bear with me.
Yeah.
Cool.
So a system is a core of a problem and is also a core of a potential solution. The system we are living under. You will identify by yourself which system we are living under, but I think it's capitalism, but it's fine. So it says we are looking at the works of the people who, like Frantz Fanon, who says, in the colony, the nationalist elite takes over power after independence are underdeveloped. So how are they underdeveloped? Look at our educational system. It's a covert discrimination through a financial muscle, because in order for you to get a good education in our country, you must have money, because we do not have free education. So now your financial muscle will determine whether you are getting educated or not, right? So if people are not educated, then you are always able to control them. Through what? Dependency. Our government is creating a dependency in the class 350s, the grants and everything. But he refused to give us free education, because education will free our minds. But this grant is a lifetime bondage, especially to young people. And then we have a social orientation. You know, the education during the apartheid regime, the architecture was used, the discipline called architecture was used to separate people in terms of their color, where they live. You have white people who are living in privileged places, Indians, colored, and the blacks in the most vulnerable places. That system has not changed because we have not integrated these people to live. So our conditions of living are still determined by our financial muscle. So that is a covert discrimination of which our democracy does not deal with, you know. And then we have this situation of divide and conquer. You know what apartheid did? Apartheid is a system whose repercussions far surpasses its time of occurrence. So now we are dealing with the effects of apartheid. We-
All right, comrades, all right.
All right. So now we are dealing with the effect of the causes of apartheid, you know. So whether you can say democracy is working under Ramaphosa or Mandela or Zuma, it doesn't matter. You can put IFP, EFF or anybody because the system has not changed. They are all underdeveloped. What the education system is doing now is to oppress us young people mentally, not to think of a world that can be possible for the worst of our people. So what we are doing, we are taking ready-made models from Europe. We want to make it ours. We are unable to give or to provide a space for our people to think out the world they want to live in. You know what is happening? We have a coalition government here in Ethekwini. Next year, let's say there's no political party who's got an outright majority who wins the elections. There must be what coalition government. You know what they will do? First thing, they will take our ministers, put them in the church to Europe to learn how the coalition government works.
Wait.
So now they are unable to think out, like to say, what can we do for our people, you know, especially to free our young people to think of the world they want to live into. Because now they are saying they fought for this freedom. They are there pensioners in parliament. You know, we are the youth here. So now our parliament has become an old age home. As she said. So they are unable to think that what they only worry about is to say, when I take pension, already they are in years of pension. When I sit down, I want to have this amount of money. They don't think of the future. They're thinking of the now. So now we have to think out our future as young people. So you, all the people who think that you want to dictate to us, you can't. You don't have a right to dictate over this good stuff right here. Young people are coming for you. Thank you.
Leaders. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you give him a round of applause? Oh, did you just? Okay. Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. Sis, you guys are saying we must end the program here. It's No, I'm joking. Interesting. What's interesting, one, for me about what you just said, I don't know if you've captured all of the thoughts at the table, because at the moment, Black Sash is leading the charge for basic income grant. So is the ways in which we engage with you know, sometimes the other thing that I find difficult as a Black young South African is that we sometimes own the labels that other people use against us. So the idea of dependency syndrome is problematic for me because the failures of our government are not the failures of some of the social protection programs. Just because certain things aren't being done. So education, for instance, and I get what you mean insofar as education not being free and the ways in which it's structured. It only serves a specific class of people. And so but when at the same time, you also have to acknowledge that without the social protections that we have in this country, we would be in a lot worse position. There are a number of us and our families who continue to live just barely above the breadline, not even like living wage, like just above the breadline. And so when we talk about things like social protection, we must also be fair and cognizant of what outside of that, what that would mean. You talked about the idea of coalitions, and you said they'll take place. I can tell you factually that opposition parties have already gone overseas to study. At least from what I'm aware of. For instance, one of the opposition parties in this province, I'll say province because there's a major opposition party now, I think. They've already been overseas to study. And I think what is important about for me, at least what Pekezenzo says, is that there needs to be a process of collectively thinking or rethinking what this democracy, what this country ought to be. But the problem at the moment is that it's conversations that civil society is having on its own and with itself, right? If it were to be a government led program, one, You just increase buy-in, increase the potential for resources for these conversations to happen, but also you'll be able to easier funnel it into spaces where legislation and public debate is actually nice. We gather here at Langeni, we gather Mlazi, we gather Doesn't Hook, and we talk about these things, and it's nice. But how do we make sure that it gets in the right space and it has the ability to influence power and change things as we experience? I think is just an extension of what you were saying that I would like to add, that we need to think consciously about that. Can I ask ma'am at the back, Ngagungamalala, so that yes, ma'am, it's your turn. Then you. She has a lot of papers. Do you want to go to the front? Sure, no problem. If you can get closer to the mic, please, if possible.
Hi. I want to start with the expectation of being here, and the expectation of us was that we were going to unpack democracy at a level that gave us insight as to whether our democracy was. On paper. And we mustn't run away from that. But the fragmentation of that democracy through the gatekeepers, the religious sector, does not allow us to implement and utilize the tools of that democracy to benefit the people of South Africa. And we're not talking about color, political affiliation or financial affiliation. No, we're not talking about. We're talking about people, whether you're in Matatiele, or whether you're in Sandton, or whether you're on the beach. Each and every person should be beneficiaries of that democracy. And I love what you said. I love the fact that you said that understanding the different levels of the democracy. Because if you look at our democracy, in Matatiele or in a rural area, it has its own tools that are needed to be utilized so that it can work in accordance with the scenario, in accordance with the community structures, with the community's systems, and with the plight of the very same democracy that we're talking about. Take it to Sandton, and it can work there. It's just that the tools that are used for the democracy to work will be implemented. And there's something that you said that stretched me. I love you, but I have to say this. When you say the older people, and listen, government has, I'm not going to go about that in Parliament, but there's a group of people from the age of 55, maybe even 60, depending, that have a lot of wisdom. Not talking education, we all have enough education. And the youth of our country can carry the democracy of our country, and they can take us places. But the wisdom to be able to do it should be utilized from those people who have concerns in the legacy, because that legacy is for our grandchildren. The legacy that you're going to carry on our behalf, we want to pass on in terms of wisdom, because the mess up has already been done. utilizing our democracy as a conduit for self-gain. So we as people of our country have something, I'm choosing my words correctly, have something to hand over. We can hand over a bit of what we understand our democracy to be and what it should be. Listen, many of us have been a part of a struggle. We are pained by what is going on in our country, but that doesn't make our democracy wrong, it's right. We just need to implement it correctly.
Thank you so much. Round of applause. In addition, so as an extension to that, so it means that there's something about the design again of our spaces to make them truly collaborative and intergenerational in some ways. Multidisciplinary. Yeah, when you have different people contributing to the same conversation, too often, unfortunately, our conversations silos. So when we speak in those silos, it sounds as though either we don't need our counterparts, or our counterparts won't be willing to listen, even when we haven't tried. So intergenerational, multidisciplinary discourse is important, especially if we're thinking about how do we reimagine South Africa going forward. A hand here. Battery still alive. It's up to you. As a facilitator, I will try again later. So at some point, my back will be towards you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, they didn't know you were going to be so tall, so that's better. Is it too high? Okay, cool. Because even me, I'm looking at you and you're over there.
Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I think there was a program like this that we held sometimes ago, and the topic was more or less like voters' apathy sometimes ago. And I was looking forward to further development on that, which obviously I found in the second speaker, especially when it was talking about different type of people that vote, and they're looking at the 35% who are eligible voters who were not voting. But I would like to also tell us that in our gathering here, we discovered something like, I wish I can call the 3 axes of political system that can actually foster our democracy. And when we talk about the value of our democracy, we're actually talking about what's the estimate, how to estimate the worth of our democracy. There are challenges in every form of governance or system, you get me? But I think people operate the one that they feel it's more advantageous to them, that gives them more benefits and all that. So here we talked about the value of democracy. And incidentally, there are 3 things that we pointed out, which I still found very relevant to our current democracy and can also foster what we are gaining for. We have 2 participants here who had never voted before. And I really appreciated the fact that they said they would like to vote, but they want to see what is the need for them to vote, which I think in a way is erasing the voters' apathy that we are talking about, that people are eligible, but they are not concerned about it. So it means that we have people who will actually buy into this thing if we keep operating the system in the right direction. Then secondly, we have another voter who has been voting, but asking a question again, is it worth it to continue to vote? It's also a challenge. She's a representative of many people out there too, who have been voting. But at this point in time, they are asking, is there a need to continue in this vote? Just like married people, one wanting out and says, is there a need for this marriage? You get me? It's a silent question. We might think, oh, marriage is sacred, but it's not by all means that you have to stay there. If it's not favoring you or advancing your cause, whether here or eternally, you can ask questions. That's the essence of our gathering. So we have someone who is asking, I've been voting. Is there a need for me to continue to vote? That is the second leg. Now, the third leg, incidentally, again, was our brother there who has been voting. But I felt if he found it very alarming that we keep voting people up there, but they are not delivering on the social services. that we expect from them. So on his part, he said, I would like to offer myself, go up there and get things done the way the current leaders who are an active moribund. Then I called him the Moses that Google was talking about. But I put a question to him. I said, who told you that the desire you have in going there to represent the people, that the current people there don't have the same desire? Don't you think that there are underlying factors or things affecting them, which is the systemic thing, which I think you pointed out to, the system itself? When you are good and you get there, what does the system turn you to? We need to find a way to address the system itself. And that's the system exactly that the politicians don't want you to know anything about. They are good. They give you their promises. They are nice looking, good messages and all that. But the angel get there becomes the devil. And you're like, how come? Are you like them? We should ask this question. Why is it that somebody who happens to be more like an angel gets there and in no time it becomes like them? There is a coloration among them. What's happening up there? So there is no saying that if you want to go there, you can make a difference. But are you powerful enough, knowledgeable enough to face this? Because also in this gathering, there was another gathering that was held sometimes ago, and we're talking about accountability. And there was a woman that came, one of these speakers that came, and we said, is it that they don't know there is corruption up there? But I've forgotten where the woman came from, municipality, somewhere where they had to do with accountability. And she was like, somebody mentioned how things happen, but how is our life saved? Because we have whistleblowers. What's the protection for whistleblowers? When they blow the whistle on your behalf, do you protect them or you run?
Yeah.
They fend for their lives. So you see the reason why a lot of people get there and they play different roles when they get there. But what we are saying is that regardless of all of this, we still need to deliver what the people want.
Hi,
Now, you permit me to just bring in an analogy of my country.
Yes, hi.
Nigeria,
Can you hear
our
me?
last election. Something
Okay.
very, very
I would like to
different
inquire
there was a third leg.
on
In Nigeria, we used to have two major parties,
on the line
but there was a great
for,
offset this time around. The third one, which is the third force, came into being.
348
But I tell you, watch out
2406.
for the third force in the next election because youths
Oh,
are
33
hungry. In Lagos, they
348
demystified what used to be the
2406.
standard there. They were surprised. The current president-elect lost there, which is the major political zone. And that's the point I'm something.
Oh,
that
okay.
when people get to a point, they will make a change. I still want to believe that people can make a change.
There
Young
was
people can make a change. And
there's
that's why I was so happy that two people who had never voted before signified their interest and
a
said,
credit
what
that we
exactly
had
is
from
this about? It
last
shows that
year.
what, there is hope for this democracy. And meaning
Okay,
that what we are
and
advancing
Thank you so much.
and then
Uh,
I'm not sure how much the
Are
bill
you
is
a preacher in
for
your
now,
part-time or?
and I've
Not-
received
Are you?
conflicting
Okay.
what
University lecture. Okay.
invoices.
Hey, lectures are happening differently.
So
these-
I just want to check what
No, the energy is what I'm
actual,
applauding. Yeah. Okay. Thank you
balance,
so much.
and is there
You know, when you went high,
has
it was like,
the,
hey, like, give me an
credit
amen.
be implemented that we were told I was going to get paid back, and
Who was
then
next?
we said, no, to
Yeah,
pay
yes,
it
ma'am.
towards
Yes.
the-
Let me lower
towards
this
the bill.
mic. You want to stand? Oh, you want to stand at the podium? Oh, you want to stand there? Okay, I must bring. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Sorry. 1 second, we'll let you know. There we go.
Hello?
Yes, we can
Can you
hear you.
hear me? Okay, my name is Hansa Naika and I'm a community activist. I'm not in any political party now. Right, first of all,
Anymore.
I want to say, all of you, thank you, and especially for the one who did the presentation. And it was very informative, especially the one about the stats and also from SAFM. The
Yes.
biggest question is, what is democracy?
It's
That is
a business account.
The question is, democracy means the power of the people to do what is right. And everybody, irrespective of who they are, whether they're minority majority or whatever, they all have to be part of the democracy. There's no such thing as majority will say this and it goes. That means public participation.
Zamaguhle Women
So-
and Youth Project.
Use your social media for good, young or old. Right. The key points that we came across
Sorry?
on our team, we only 3 on the table, but it was a good team.
Okay.
The main
There's an
thing that
invoice
I
from
have
from the
noticed
11th
is
of
a lot
April.
of people on social media, they on TikTok and whatever, but they are not dealing with what is
Oh,
important to
it's-
our community.
Oh,
whether
okay. It's
young
Ayanda
or
Tutoy
old.
at live.
When there's a problem,
.com.
everybody gets on the bandwagon, whether it's good or bad.
You're speaking to Ayanda
But
Tutoy.
we need to encourage more public participation.
Cell phone number is
Like
082 761
I am going to the
3431.
meeting. I can take one of the young people with me because sometimes they bored sitting at home.
It's
So I don't believe in the
034917.
system of voting and choosing for the political party. Number one is because the wrong people get elected most of the time. What
Yes,
I
yes,
have
it's an NPO.
especially when there's bribery and corruption. If you're a poor person, you're a community activist, but you
Okay,
don't have your own home and all. But there
yeah,
are some political
I've
parties,
received
they want you to
conflicting
put money up front.
information.
Yet in the beginning,
Okay,
when you are volunteering, you're sitting with peanut butter
So
sandwich at 1 o'clock
our line
I
got
have
cut
done.
off last year.
and going to work,
Okay, and
the
then
next day, having
we
few hours of
had
sleep. Nowadays, if you involved in the election
we had
process,
a
you get paid
deposit.
120 rand,
O-
and then you
Okay,
get food
that
and all that stuff. But which
we had
we
paid and we
have
were told
built
we were going to
people
get it
from the
back,
ground.
but we reinstated the line and
And
paid the
That's how you have to
ar-
choose your
arrears.
leaders. Example, if you're in a
Okay,
community, especially like the
so
independent
that
candidate,
amount
choose
we
a
were told
leader
we were going to be
who is
credited.
people orientated,
And
not
now I've
a leader that
received
wants
an
to
an
jump
an
on the bandwagon
invoice
if that party for
saying
now
that
is
amount was
popular or
credited.
whatever, because
Okay.
that doesn't
At the
help the
time
community on the ground.
we paid the arrears and then again paid a
Hold
deposit
your leaders
again to
accountable.
reinstate the line.
Number one,
But
like
we
if you
already
got a
had a
business,
deposit before, and then we said
there is performance
um,
review,
Falcom said it was just
performance
going to be
appraisal.
credited
What's
our
your track
telephone
record?
bill.
What have you done?
Okay.
How many meetings did you
So,
hold? So
right
you have
now,
to have a register to say, oh, so many people
last
came.
month we
Like
were sitting
example,
with the
we
bill
know how many people are here.
that
So that
haven't
is
been
one of
paid
the
yet,
things that we have
and
to do. That is
now
democracy.
I've got
There are people that, especially the elderly.
an invoice
I mean, they are
saying
youth,
that we've been
youth are helping
credited.
themselves.
So I just
Elderly
wanted
are
to check
helping
on
the youth
that.
because most of them
If
finish
that
school, they got
credit
no
has
job, they
paid
rely on
that
the
bill.
parents, either grannies, grandfather. They're making babies and leaving at home and they're going to work. Meanwhile, the older person
Okay.
is suffering. And then there's elderly people where the lights and waters are coming too high.
Right now,
So
I
we need,
don't
like,
really
volunteer
remember.
to do
It
something,
was
because
almost
when you
1,000
volunteer,
rand.
you can get a job.
Yeah,
That's
the credit had been the
because people
initial
see, hey,
deposit
you're a
that was
worker,
going
so
to be
somebody
paid
will
back
offer
to
you a
us.
job. So
So
don't sit at home and say,
yeah,
no, I'm going to collect
it was
350 grand
almost
and
1,000 rand.
that's fine. In election time, I'm going to vote for Ramaphosa because he's giving me that 350. But there's nothing wrong with Mr. Ramaphosa. He's a good president, in my opinion. In my opinion, that is. Right. Because people are concentrating on the Pala Mera, there are billions and millions getting stolen from Eskom, but they're worried about the $400 that is missing.
Yes,
And who's
yeah.
the victim? Who's the victim? That's our country. Like in domestic violence, the victim gets treated like they
Now,
are.
I received
Because wearing a
now
short skirt,
on
your
the 11th
boobs were
of
showing,
April
whatever.
an
Just
email
an example.
saying that
Yeah.
it's been credited.
Freedom is being able to know your rights and wrongs.
Yes, yes.
Example, corruption, greed,
That's what
bribes. Don't support it. You'd rather let your child sit at home and learn than paying bribe to
just
get your
confirming
driver's
now.
license, paying bribe to get a job in the police force when you're not fit the next day.
and an email with the invoice.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am.
The last one, the last one.
Oh, last one.
The last
The last one.
To the youth.
In the mic. So for people online, yeah, for people online, in the mic.
The last one is to the youth.
Mm.
Do what you can with what you have. A perfect example, I collect cans also. I'm collecting the grant, but I also collect cans because the youth are throwing the 10 cents and 20 cents. Will our economy grow? On the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the shares can go for 1 cent. So, economic freedom, whatever. When you're throwing money, how much does it cost to make a 10 cent? Does anybody know yet? Most probably it's 50 cents by now. Last time you... I'm just saying.
What?
So,
Okay.
No, it's,
Okay.
it says here, I'm
knowledge
looking
is
at the invoice.
an
It says
education
credit.
is key.
Yeah.
It says
Use it wisely.
credit amount 996 credits.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think this is important because a lot of the
Yeah.
things you were saying was also about putting the spotlight back on us as citizens.
Okay,
in
I
terms of the
received it
work
on the
that
11th, but on the invoice
we
date,
exercise our
it says 9
role
April.
as citizens. Be more
2023.
active, be engaged in the political process in a legitimate way, be active in the spaces where you occupy. Do what you
It's
can
the
with what you
first
have.
page.
You might not have all of the money, you might not have access to some of the things, but you have a constituency. You sit with your friends at the corner. What conversations are you having with them? Is it just that there's no future, there's no hope, or do you have an ability to spin it positively for the purposes of? I think the last one was interesting because like I never thought about it because no, it's true. Like because
It's
it takes money to make money,
439902.
and not in the general sense about when you're a business or an entrepreneur, but there's a cost to everything, right? Every like single product that's produced. I need to research how much money does it take to make a 10 cents, like a 10 cents coin. Like, what's the process, like energy wise? There's a certain amount.
439902.
So I'm not fixated on the amount, but I'm fixated on the process. So in terms of energy, ESCOM contributes in one way or the other. In terms of staffing and labor, there's a process that's involved. And I think once we are able to, as citizens, using data, using the ability to separate and make clear what the process, step 1, step 2, step 3 is, I think it also encourages us to be more alert in terms of what's happening. At the moment, there's a conversation about demarcation that's happening, and the only reason why we know that I didn't know that demarcation board was sitting at the moment. The only reason why I know is because of Umgeni municipality and the politics that's at play in that space. How is it that this conversation is happening at a party political level, but citizens aren't involved in the discussion? It's such a weird thing. Like, when were we going to be told, or do I read the wrong newspapers?
Okay, so now what's going to happen
doesn't
with
make
that
sense. So demarcations, guys, are being talked about. The ways in which you're going to vote next year in terms of voting district is being talked about right now.
This is the
Are
invoice
you
now
aware?
that I
What are
got
you doing? What are you doing to
charges
find out about that?
for
sort of stuff?
April
That's important.
2023.
And
It's a
we really
credit
thank you and the
of
other two people on the
996.
team for your contribution. Thank you very much. Pops, is there any other table that hasn't been represented that would like to talk? Sanele, yes? Pops and then Sanele.
It's the same landline.
The mic is too heavy for me to carry around again.
Hi, everybody. Okay, I'm not going to go with the democracy thing. I want to move forward.
Yeah.
Yes,
moving
yes.
forward
We
is,
only have
number
one
do you all
landline. It's
know
the same
voter
landline.
registration is going to happen on the 18th and 19th of November this year? So if you didn't know, please mark it down.
It's the same landline. We didn't
Unless
change the landline. We didn't, yeah.
And as far as we
When it
know,
was
only
suspended
the
last
young
year,
people
the
have
landline
used
doesn't
this
change.
facility.
It's the same
The
landline.
next thing with regards to the independent candidates, there's a whole process in play. And even though our president has set for a reform council to form, whether that council does it to elaborate and to put forward into the next election is not going to affect the fact that election is going to happen. Okay, so bear in mind all of these very important things,
so now
because the
Can you not
process of
transfer the
elections in
credit
terms of
to
the
the
law is
other
happening.
account number now?
Whether
Because it's
we
one
are
line.
here sitting here and thinking what to do next year, it's going to happen. And
Yeah,
your
please do.
participation is going to be very, very crucial in what happens. The other thing
Okay.
is with the amendment bill, the addition to independent candidates standing and unrepresented political parties. That means unrepresented political parties. So currently we have 14 parties that are
In the
represented in
National
parliament,
Assembly, yeah.
but we have 500 plus parties that are going to be contesting in the elections. So those unrepresented parties together with the independents are now on one level bar, which means they have to produce the same results as an independent candidate for them to get a seat. They've already worked at the quota. In KZN, 13,000 votes to get one seat.
Parliamentary seat.
Parliamentary. I
Okay,
think
I'm holding.
6,600 and something votes for a provincial seat. This has never happened before because the quota would only be determined after the voting process was done. Now they've already given you a step up forward. So this is going to be very, very, okay, Mike, I know Mike will I'm speaking you from what I know. I sat in the IEC media briefing in the Zoom meeting. So that's how I got all this information. So as they were speaking out, I took notes.
Yeah. I think,
Because
yeah, just a slight correction, maybe Mike, and at the 6,000 is just to register,
Yeah.
to participate
To
in
participate
the election.
in the election.
As an initial threshold. I don't know, Mike,
Yes,
you can go to the mic as well. You guys can share the mic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Come, Mike.
Mike and Pops at the mic.
Mike and I worked.
I have known Pops for 23 years. Right. Those numbers are the numbers of signatures required before you can contest elections.
Yeah.
They are not the numbers of votes that get you into parliament.
Yeah.
So to get into the National Assembly in KZN, you need 85,000 votes, but you need about 13,000 signatures. Imagine what it is like for an independent or a small party to walk around and find 13,000 people who support you across a whole province. If you go to Warwick Triangle, lots of people there. If you spend one whole day there, how many signatures do you think you'll get? 20? Right. But now it's going to take you months to get that number of signatures. So that's the problem. So that isn't the votes. The bad news is it's the signatures are impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And the signatures are impossible because you're asking people to put their name and ID number on a document that doesn't guarantee, they don't want to give you the ID number, but they also don't know where you're taking the information. We heard with the stats that Preston was talking about earlier, that people think that a government knows who you voted for. And for a lot of the citizens in this country, they think that you use that information to target you, either to include you or not include you in certain government services. And as a result, this is where we find ourselves for the most part.
So in closing, I
Yes.
just want to say this, which I repeat.
This has been a very collaborative session. Thank you so much.
At every meeting, we need to have voting in election compulsory. Then only we will see a change.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
That's
That is something I'm gonna keep fighting about.
good luck, Pops. Good luck. As per chapter 2 of the South African Constitution, the Bill of Rights entitled us to choice. Might be unconstitutional to mandate that, but yeah. Sanele as a closing remark, and then we'll ask our two speakers, Uma Angatusa step out, as well as Preston to give us some final feedback, both in terms of what was addressed as part of what questions were posed to them, or maybe some inclinations, and then of course, if they have a final word to say, what is the journey that we need to walk based on both the data as well as the understanding of where communities are at.
290.
Kodwa kwi-mic ingakho ngathi ngikhuluma bese ingekho isidingo
Four.
kodwa ubusawokho
2904.
manje seniyaxoxa lana hey madod.
Triple four two 290
Good afternoon.
Good
Yeah.
afternoon to everyone.
Yes. And then,
My name is Hadeb. You can address me by Hadeb. What's Ha? H.
So
Ah.
from the
Hadeb,
closed
yes.
account to the active account,
In closing.
because the active account has an outstanding balance
I'm from the organization called the Youth
that is
Interactive.
supposed to 1,007
As I've been sitting and listening,
cents, and the current
there are these
one
three
is
people, the slave master,
Okay,
the house Negro,
so
and the
I have
field
to
Negro.
pay
All of these people look at democracy
a balance of
from
that
where
now.
they are. The slave master tells the house Negro and the field Negro
Okay.
that you should be happy.
You
You should be appreciative. You have a roof over your head. You have food to eat. You are in a secured space. That's the slave master telling the slave Negro, the house Negro, and the field Negro. Now we have the field Negro and the house Negro, who are both of the same slave master, under the same system, but in different spaces.
Okay, it's going to be about 7 days.
The house Negro tells the field Negro that we should be appreciative of what we have. That's the house Negro telling the field Negro that we should be appreciative of where we are. We have a master that loves us.
On the next invoice, okay.
We have a master that feeds us. We have a master that gives us clothes. We have a master that gives us blankets and sponges to sleep
I
on.
just received that one.
That's
I
the
didn't
house
receive that,
Negro.
the other
telling
one.
the field Negro.
So I didn't know that
Both of them are called niggers, by the way.
there was still that.
Both of them are called
Yeah.
slaves, by the
I
way.
think-
But their
Okay.
treatment is different.
So,
And when this one talks to this one, they think this
is
one is
the
not
line
appreciating
okay
what we
now?
have. Because this one is
Right
speaking
now,
from the field point of view.
Okay, I haven't checked it. That's
And
why
this one is
I
speaking
was
from the
checking
house
if the line
point
is
of
okay.
view. Both of them are slaves, mind you. Now,
Okay, I just need to.
with that information,
I just
what
need
should
to
we
make
say?
a payment. Is it working fine? I'm not sure right now because I am not in the office.
Now, when we speak of democracy as we are seated here,
Okay,
I'm seeing a lot of slaves
so for
who are
it to be
speaking from where they
unsuspended,
are and their point of privilege or lack thereof.
okay.
Now, because
The
we
full
will
amount.
not stop. Let's continue talking nonetheless.
No.
We should have an idea, according to conversation was, we should have an idea of what democracy can achieve.
Okay, for it to be unsuspended.
Some of us are saying democracy works. Some of us are saying
Okay,
democracy doesn't
and
work.
then
Some of us are saying we are seeing a
after
potential to
7 days, the credit is going to
We are
reflect.
speaking from where we are. We do not have a clear understanding of what democracy is, as I was mentioning that. For a person who has never had running water for the past year, when you talk to them about democracy, what are you saying to them? For a person who has a geyser in their homes, compared to a person who has to go to the tap during winter, which is far down, or go to the river, in fact, to fetch water.
Okay.
What are you saying to that person? For a child who has to walk for an hour to school, and a child who lives next to the school, what are you saying? For a child who has to go across bridges to access education, and a child, even if they woke up at 7, they are at school by 8. This one has to wake up at 4. And all of these bankers approach when it comes to the pass mark. What are you saying to this child if you're saying democracy works? But mind you, we are speaking from where we are. Democracy should be constantly monitored. One of the biggest challenges is that democracy is not monitored. As Brian was saying, we sit as civil society on our own. None of these principles are here. In fact, maybe it's a good thing that
Via EFT.
because I could imagine them being here and whatever we are saying to them not making sense to them when they walk out of the room and what were we saying for the past 6 hours today, if it's not going to be implemented? I think for me, this independent candidacy is a middle finger to the South African citizens, because you can't say, we can't glorify this independence candidacy when you're going to tell the people that you can now have an independent council.
Okay,
But there is no
1021
independent PR
0.
councillor in council, where this person is going to take matters of their constituency too, because when they get there, they are gonna come to PR councillors that belong to political parties, and the first question they ask them, who is your constituent? Who have you come to submit your issues to? Because this person is an enemy to all of them. Now, what are we saying? What are we saying about this animal called democracy? We can clarify independent candidacy, but will it work? Even if we took it to national level and we voted for an independent president, mind you, the president does not pass. The president signs off. There needs to be a majority buy-in for something to take off the ground. If the majority belongs to political parties, where is the power of that independent president? Because we are not living in a dictatorship. Democracy can only work if there are checks and balances. We took systems that were operating during the apartheid system, and we adopted them as they were post-apartheid. Hence why you see today, in a democratic country, we have Umali Usi and we have the independent board, which caters for private schools and all of these, expensive educational institutes. In a democratic country, if education was equal, why did the privileged see a need to have an independent board separate from Umalus? Why was there a need for that if education was equal in South Africa? As my brother was speaking. But hey, nonetheless, when we speak from where we are.
Thank you. It was just that is all.
And I hope I was
Yeah. No. There is nothing else. That is all. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I think the biggest crime that was ever inflicted on citizens was by our forebearers, who maybe it was the choice they had at the time. I don't know. But post-apartheid, the systems they chose to adopt for the next generations after them, they knew that if they adopt these systems, how will these systems work for them? It was not necessarily for the South African citizen. They knew how these systems will work for them. Even today, if we want to vote, it will even in civil society, division is created purposely within civil society. Social ills were created purposely because we did not need to have one voice. Today, if you speak to a young person in tertiary about employment, employment is not a factor to them. Free education is a factor to them. If you speak to a young person who's outside of tertiary, who wants a job, and you tell them to fight for free education, to them it does not make sense, because to them a job is what makes sense. If you speak to a person who does not have a clinic in their area, and you're telling this person about water, they will fight you because water is not a factor to them. A clinic being present in their area is a factor to them. All of these things are created purposefully to divide the citizens of South Africa. But yeah, we can keep on defending democracy because we're speaking from where we are. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Much appreciated in terms of your feedback, input, and all of the willingness to contribute. Ngicela uMamzandile and Preston to just round us up in terms of inputs. I'm not even going to ask you to go to the front. I'm just going to give you your mic where you are. There's another mic, so we'll give her that mic. I thought Sue was going to fetch that mic for me. It's okay. Thank you. So just Mhlambe, your thoughts and around what has come out in the room today. And of course, Mhlambe, just a final message about next week's march. If you'd like these people, Nampo Pegizens and no Sunday and Gatsba Yaboi Energy Con.
Amanda. Yeah. Thanks, comrade, to get this opportunity to share to all of you about my social movement. Because most of you used to see it on TV. Now you heard from the horse's mouth.
Yes.
So on the 26th of
Sounds like YouTube, man.
On Wednesday, we are inviting everyone who is in this house attend our march from Caris Fountain. We are starting at 9. Then at City Hall, we'll be leaving at 1 o'clock. We are inviting all of you because I can hear everyone is angry. I can hear that everyone is not free. So I'm inviting all of you, comrades, to our Unfreedom Day. Amanda.
Awethu, siyabonga. Amabhasi akhona.
Yeah, if there's anyone who can mobilize his or her community, can call the office about the transport.
Leadership. During over lunch, number and engage. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for sharing with us the work of Abahlali baseMjondolo. I think as an organization who works in this space, it's important that one see all communities as and give all communities an opportunity to represent their views and options. So when we go out into communities, we don't go there alone. We know we don't belong there, we're not from there, we don't understand the context, but it is you who helps us to navigate that space. And so even with the different constituencies, we recognize the value that you as the holders of those containers are able to provide. So we thank you very much for being willing to spend time with us today. Preston, I think the big question for you was, how do you gather this data? Who's part of this data? Sampling, where do you get your sample from? How big is your sample size? I know you guys have a very good track record insofar as like you can say what it is, but it's like what the different measures for how wrong or the margin of error. Yeah, so you can talk to us about that, but also just give us a sense of on the rest of the continent. Are people feeling the same? Is this the general trend? Especially living under a government that is led by a liberation movement, and how liberation movements have grappled with when they get into power, how they engage with that power in the interest of the rest of society.
Sure, thank you so much. It's really been a privilege to be here and provide some closing remarks, colleagues. I'll start off with first the methodology and the robustness of the survey that I've presented. As I've been asked, we have a 2 to 3% of margin of error, which is a very statistically robust margin of error for this type of work, right? As I mentioned to you, that our survey results are all nationally representative. So although we draw from a sample, right, of South Africans, the techniques and the statistical methods we use to draw those samples allow us to have very big statistical power in how we infer on the population. But what does it mean for us, right? It just means that we can take our anecdotal evidence and our own subjective evidence that we experience in our own communities, and then we can see how it applies to a larger focus. we can see how it applies to a national dialogue, for instance, right? Just to give you some sort of examples of how robust our data is. When we came out in 2020 relating to the onset of COVID-19 and how the vaccination onset would take, right? Our results were showing that there was an extremely high vaccine hesitancy in the country, right? Whereas other research institutes like the HSRC, even Stats SA, were showing that the vaccine uptake will be very large, right? And we came into a lot of questioning as to the robustness of how we got these responses. And it turned out that, as you see, vaccine hesitancy is still a big thing in the country. Like the uptake of vaccines was so low during the biggest waves of COVID-19. So that's just an example of how robust our data is, right? In terms of providing some final remarks to close the day, right? A lot was said, and I see that civil society organs, they really like to have robust and fiery dialogues, which is good for the communities and the constituencies you guys represent, but it's also good for national dialogue. And I think one of the broad things that I take away from today is there's a clear distinction between the concept of democracy and the fruit of democracy. And so I leave you with this question this afternoon. What fruit will you bear for democracy? Thank you.
That's a great way to end, considering that there's an organization called the Civics Academy, and they do a lot of videos around the subject matter, civic education related stuff, and they do talk about that democracy is the root, or is the trunk, and there are fruits that democracy ought to bear, and quite often the apple falls far away from the tree if we are the trees as citizens, or it gets poached from the tree itself by other people. They have easier access. We have taller people who are able to reach the fruits much quicker than those of us who are shorter. And so how do we create equity? How do we create a space where, regardless of what size shoes you wear, you're still able to walk comfortably and with the same level of intention behind whatever sort of path you tread? I was hoping we'd be more excited for the future, but I think I understand the moment that the country and our different communities are in, and particularly here in eThekwini, kuningi okwenzakalayo, and as the kids say, it's getting kuningier. I did premise that, as the kids say, I'm no longer a kid in the general sense of the word. We have omfunego for that sort of stuff. But there's really a sense that there's a lot more work that ought to be done. And what I hope, as people who are driving different conversations in our communities and constituencies, that we can still walk the path. I don't know of an alternative system that works well. You might tell me philosophically about Paul Kagame and the work that's happening in that space, but I can also tell you of all of the atrocities that I am aware of in that space, that maybe don't settle. It's too soon in the relationship to give up. Don't let go. And unfortunately, the relationship that we've held on to much longer than we have and cared for much longer is the relationship that we have with the ruling party, as opposed to with democracy itself. So we are experiencing a Stockholm syndrome of a sort, because we've been willing to be battered, and we still go back to that relationship. But at the same time, and I'm sorry if this is triggering for you on a GBF side, Ngapolis, I should have said, no, seriously, Ngapolis. But at the same time, it's important that we don't walk away from the relationship having not exhausted, and not the relationship with the ANC, the relationship with democracy. having not exhausted all of our mechanisms. If we're saying we've exhausted all of the processes that relate to democracy, I can tell you now you're lying to us and to yourself. If you look at the turnout, just as an indicator at base level, how many people voted, how many people didn't vote? 18 and 19-year-olds in 2021 didn't register at all to participate in that election. If you turned 18, 19 in that year, you weren't registered to become a part of that poll. And so that's scary because then we can't, our government at the moment, if we were to be really genuine about it, it lacks legitimacy because a significant proportion of this country didn't participate in providing a mandate. If you continue to be a part of movements at community level, if you continue to be a part of civil society, again, the same thing that I said on Tuesday to those activists is, who are you giving your mandate to? Who are you giving? So you go and you meet, you workshop, you do all of these lovely proposals. Oh, come on. Hey, you don't show, but I forgot. Hey, it's better when you guys don't make a political, I'm more comfortable that way. But at the same time, it's important to say, to what extent have you, when you run those workshops as activists, when you come up with these nice policy proposals, do you trust that it's going to go to the right place if you haven't participated at the first level of it, if you haven't participated at the voting stage? But beyond that, there are other mechanisms as part of it. And yes, democracy is hard work, guys. It's work. That's why they say civic participation. They say you must participate. And this is the unfortunate part, that to some extent, your citizenship is held in abeyance until you can fulfill certain criteria. And when I say that it's held in abeyance, it doesn't mean that you cease to be a citizen, but if you're not engaged in that process of actually making sure that the fruits you yield are sweet enough, if you don't till the soil of this democracy, you're going to end up with a rotten fruit. You're going to end up with you're going to plant guavas and come up, get mangoes at the end, and you're going to wonder what happened because you weren't there for the full duration. Someone came and took out your seeds and put something else in there. And so, yeah, even that is problematic. You guys, get your minds out the gutter and go and participate in democracy. But yeah, that's where I ended today. We hope to see you at our coming events. The next two specific workshops that we're hosting next week is already filled up insofar as the workshopping civil society around, I think it was fundraising, but I think the subject matter is shifting slightly to governance for the next workshop. And in May, we're going to be hosting two workshops. And if you come from a political party in particular, please, and you want to be part of those workshops, even though in Shaya, the DA, the EFF, because the ANC now, yeah, the IFP, but at the same time, if you see civil society as a valuable stakeholder and you want to be in a space where you can collaboratively think up, how do we make this work for us better in future? How do we ensure that either they come back to their political home or they come back to actually participating in the political process in a meaningful way? Surely now Congolese isn't happy about the fact that people are not turning up to the polls. Surely the Democratic Alliance are also unsatisfied with the turnout at the polls. Surely the EFF in the same way, with the million followers, but probably as a percentage, with the million followers, 300,000 votes out of that million, right? On Twitter, because that's, social media is not real. Bots will make you believe that you've got followership. Okay, now I'm ready. I can. No, you can't believe in that stuff. So sometimes I make jokes. If they go over your head, ask your friend next to you what I just said. So in May, we'll be talking. We'll be workshopping around coalitions. The stuff that Ubafo said people go overseas for, we offer it in Durban as the TDP. And then at the latter part of May, we'll also be workshopping some understanding the South African voter is the title of the workshop, and we'll be going into depth insofar as all of these different data sets that were provided to us by Preston, insofar as why do people not vote? What would encourage greater voter participation? What is the work for political parties? Because those are the people that we will be workshopping that they need to do. What are the gaps insofar as, at least as a civil society participant and as academics who will be in that space, that hasn't been pushed to the right space, and increasing that. On the 18th of May, we have our media summit. I think the invitation is going to come out, or has come out, Sir? At the latter part of this week. I think it's going to come out at the end of this week for the 18th of May. So media and the role that it plays in our democracy is an important question as well. We know in America, the type of media that they have in that space is quite divisive. We are seeing parts of that coming into this space in our country. We've heard things like fake news and all of that sort of stuff. So we want media practitioners to themselves account about what this actually means and what their role in that democracy is. And that's open to everyone. The other two workshops are specifically for people who are politicians, who are involved in political parties in one way or the other. And then, yeah, we on an ongoing basis, we're hosting community dialogues around local governance, and that's a staple of our work. Of course, we also have, on the other hand, a very significant project that's coming to a close this year, but we continue to work on it as well around migration that's ongoing as well. So that's where we are as an organization, and we hope to see you pushing us next week, but next week I'm traveling to different parts of the province. I wish the country, but the province in Malaiko to the different parts of the province to try and have community dialogues around local governance. We're going to take a trip now. I'm going to take on an excursion. Please, when we take the trip, please hold your partner's hand, a single file, everything. Utandiwe is going to give us coupons. We're going to Maharani for lunch. The hotel next door, the second floor, the hotel next door. Unfortunately, because of the size of the Department of Education, and the IIEP, but next door, why the system is that way. So we're going to be going to Maharani, and we hope that you travel safely, and we see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Drop by drop, hello. Drop by drop. Oja mi kubo, kate undi boy. Oja mi kubo. Munda bojati. Descansa tipo. Descansa tipo. Munda bojati. Drop by drop, learning your language, and you're learning how to speak the lingo of this flower. Drop by drop, hello, learning your language, and you're learning how to speak the lingo